And we'll come back into this space and this time and this place with a full reckoning that we are one, that each breath is an opportunity and even a second chance. And with that, I'll introduce our speaker for today. His name is Ivan Escalante. I'm super excited to hear him speak today. Ivan is definitely a kindred spirit of mine, and the scope of his attention to detail and the studies that he enjoys, it was easy for us to become friends. Ivan is an independent researcher and alternative historian who studies cosmology, theology, exotheology, and philosophy. And his talk today is the Aeon of Sophia, Sophia's correction. What is the Aeon of Sophia, and how is she represented in the soul of each individual? Her story is a reflection of the descent and ascent of the soul back to our fullness of being. Sophia's correction refers to a personal and collective healing that the Gnostic texts speak of, a process that is unfolding in our time. The Aeon of Sophia, i.e. the Age of Wisdom, is the culmination of this process. Would you welcome with me Ivan Escalante?
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Like he said, today's talk is about the Aeon of Sophia, Sophia's correction. And it's kind of broken up into 4 different parts, which is who Sophia is, what the Aeon of Sophia is, how her myth is a process, or her myth is what Carl Jung has coined or termed as the process of individuation, which is a soul knowing oneself, the process of knowing oneself. And Sophia's story speaks of that in a mythopoetic way, but it's reflecting psychological processes. And then I'll also talk about the correction, Sophia's correction, on a personal level and collective level, and I might get into the deeper aspects of what that means, because it's multi-layered. And so I want to start the presentation with 2 quotes, which kind of summarizes what Sophia wants us to know and what she brings to us. And it says, "What makes us free is the gnosis of who we were, of what we have become, of where we were, of wherein we have been thrown, of where to we are hastening, of what we are being freed, of what birth really is, and of what rebirth really is." And the next one, it says, "Heed these words, you who wish to probe the depths of nature. If you do not find within yourself that which you seek, neither will you find it outside. If you ignore the wonders of your own house, how do you expect to find other wonders? In you is hidden the treasure of treasures. Know thyself, and you will know the universe and the gods. And those two quotes, to put a date on them, the first one is from the 2nd century Common Era. And this one, I would say, goes back to before Common Era. I don't know the exact date, but this one reflects that this tradition of knowing yourself, and what modernly Carl Jung called the process of individuation, it has been the core root of the teachings of the ancient world, and even what they had to offer. Because the Oracle of Delphi, it was a type of institution where you could actually go and receive initiation. Uh, there's with a bunch of different ways, but most famously it was through like psychedelic brews and potions and medicines, that literally could give you access directly to the spirit world. And so Sophia is Greek for wisdom. She's the feminine aspect of God, the first thought of the One, and the creative aspect of the One. And this is almost like a recap of what Lance has been talking about, even with the wisdom workshop, because it's a universal tradition. Um, wisdom is always personified as the mother of the gods, the mother of the universe, the mother of humanity in almost every tradition. And she's known as she of many names. And kind of as a side note, this is what I'm talking about is like, it's called Gnosticism, but Gnosticism isn't so much like a religion. It's it's the way that the ancients came to understand from ancient history, and we're talking about like tens of thousands of years up to the Common Era, because that's when the Gnostics really came about. It was them reflecting on everything that had happened and what they came to understand that has been revealed to humanity in many different ways, whether it's through the mysteries, which is the different rites that you could do, or meditation, even near death experiences, everything. It's like the accumulation of knowledge that humanity has been even recording, you could say. And that's where all the ancient libraries come in. And so I venture to say that, almost like that they kind of figured it all out, and they answered almost all the questions, and that's what was the greatest threat to even the authorities of the time until this day. And so, to explain a little bit of the aeons, Sophia is an aeon, and aeons are emanations of the One. And I think there's 12 core ones and up to like 31, but they're all pairs, male and female aeons, and they're called syzygies, and they are the structural foundations of the universe. And by that, I mean with the example of depth, silence, mind, truth, word, life. It's a very basic structure where everything comes from. And they all work together to maintain the universe and our reality. And the way the Gnostics taught is that they're kind of our saviors, um, which they say is to make us rise above the universe. And I should be getting to that more in detail. So this quote is an explanation of how Sophia came to be, and I find it very, very interesting because this is one of the few places where it explains it in this detail. And I'll read it, and even if anyone has any questions, but I'll try to explain some of it in detail. So it says, "Now this Father is the one who beholds himself in the light surrounding him, which is the spring of living water and provides all the realms. He reflects on his image everywhere, sees it in the spring of the Spirit, and becomes enamored of his luminous water. For his image is in the spring of pure luminous water surrounding him. The Father's thought became a reality, and she who appeared in the presence of the Father in shining light came forth. She is the first power who preceded everything and came forth from the Father's mind as the forethought of all. Her light shines like the Father's light. She, the perfect power, is the image of the perfect invisible Virgin Spirit. She, the first power, the glory of Barbello, the perfect glory among the realms, the glory of revelation. She glorified and praised the Virgin Spirit, for because of the Spirit she had come forth. She is the first thought, the image of the Spirit. She became the universal womb, for she precedes everything." I have other slides that go into detail with this, and to me, this kind of summarizes it perfectly. The importance of who Sophia is, in that, in when everything came to be, the Father had a thought, and that thought is Sophia. And even to recap on Lance as well, he does a great job at emphasizing that it is a female that is the acting force, and the male is stillness. And so let me just go to the next slide. Sophia is the active living intelligence that is inside of us all. In the next slide, I'll have exactly how this thought unfolds from the one and how we're directly connected to it. And so to kind of go over what I've been saying about the process of individuation, she's a part of us that seeks wholeness with the one. And that's called henosis, which means oneness, and in Jungian terminology, the process of individuation. And it's, to kind of explain it, it's when you have a desire to know yourself, to learn the truth, to grow, to heal, it's Sophia that's inspiring that. And this part is to explain her story, which is known as the fall of Sophia. And it says her enthemesis, which means inner passion, to know the one, or her attempt to comprehend the incomprehensible, is what led to her fall and the creation of Yaldabaoth. And it became a separate substance, a type of blind, passionate material of which Yaldabaoth is formed from and is king of. This attempt was done alone, without her partner. And so this is referring to, which is how she's a reflection of the soul. So the soul makes mistakes. It's a process of how we learn. And this story, it's connected to why Eve is blamed in the Garden of Eden for almost committing the first sin. And it's the first, I don't think of it as a sin, but they refer to it as a mistake. And even this mistake is done by the will of Sophia and even the one. So it's all part of a bigger plan. And even though she is Sophia, there's a point where she's called Lower Sophia, but there's a point where she wants to know the one. And that process led to this desire that eventually got her to fall out of where she's from, which is called the Pleroma. And that's technically above the universe. And the story is that from the Pleroma, she had this desire to know the one, and she did it alone. And then she fell out of the Pleroma, and her body, which is pure light, became trapped and even became part of the material world. And from this fall, other things started unfolding, which most importantly is the creation of Yaldabaoth, who is known as the false god. And the false god represents ignorance and limitation of your ego. And so her mistake that she made is more of her acting impulsively or unwisely, and there's consequences for that. And that's kind of how it is here, like with life in general, that whatever you do has consequences. And sometimes, it can be negative, but making a decision, you could say, in the right state of mind, that's where it's more positive. And so with this story, it's that she did it alone, and it created the what's known as like the beginning of the story of humanity and our struggle against these lower forces. And so I'll get to in more detail with that. And so with the first thought being the first thought of the one, that unfolds in different ways. And not only are they something cosmic, but they're also something personal. So we reflect this cosmic process, and this story and everything that the Gnostics explained, it's all a reflection of what's going on internally. And this quote, it says, "They have especially robbed the noetic human of the intelligence of the snake, for it is fitting for you to be in agreement with the intelligence of these two, with the intelligence of the snake and the innocence of the dove." And when it says that they robbed, it's referring to the archons and Yaldabaoth and the dark forces that exist to keep us in a state of ignorance. And with the story of Sophia and the Gnostic teachings, it's a cosmic story that they say has been going on, since the beginning of the creation of humanity, and something that I still believe is going on till this day. And that's what would be Sophia's correction, which I would get to. So I want to explain what the faculties of the mind are. So nous just means mind, and it's masculine, as well as the logos. So the two masculine powers of the Father, nous and logos, that's the foundation of our mind. And I added Sophia here just to show that she's feminine, and it means wisdom and clarity. And from there's pronoia, epinoia, anoia, and dinoia. And this is how the ancients would break down our thinking process, and how the thought of the Father unfolds in different ways to keep the universe going as like a living mind. So pronoia means forethought, epinoia, thought, anoia, mental intent, dianoia, imagination. And these are even types of powers that we have that help us understand. These are the powers that are given to us that help us understand ourselves and all these you could say, metaphysical grand subjects, almost so that we just don't stay in ignorance, um, and gives us the ability to rise above and overpower these dark forces. There's metanoia, beyond intelligence, and these lead to anamnesis, a remembrance, henosis, uniting with the one, and in a union, Sophia logos, words of wisdom, wise reason, clear thinking. And so this also reflects the process of individuation, where he says that the beginning of that process is to look into the contents of the unconscious and of the mind, and and it leads to a hierosgamos, or a union of the male and female. And this, the Sophia logos, is kind of that union of bringing together all these powers and parts of ourselves into one, so that we can keep this within ourselves and live it. It's a way of thinking and living. And so, with that said, this text explains very clearly, to provide more clarity to that. And it's called the Trimorphic Protanoia. This is a text where it's Sophia talking in first person, and it's actually a type of genre of literature called Erotology, where the divine power is speaking, and they state who they are, what their virtues and attributes are, and and so this one, written by the Gnostics, is really interesting because it goes into, it's one of the texts that I have found that goes into the most detail about who she is and the role that she plays in creation. And so I won't read it all, but there are a few sides of this text that I want to go over. But I do want to say that it says, "She who exists before the all." In this part, "I am the life of my epinoia that dwells within every power and every eternal movement, and in invisible lights, and within the archons, angels, and demons, in every soul in Tartaros, in every material soul." And Tartaros just refers to the material realms. But here she's saying that she's in everything. And with the Gnostics, that's what they they claim, is that this this force is everything. And even though you have these dark forces and these gods that claim to be gods and powers that try to rule over humanity, that creates what's known as duality, a dualism, and that's a critique that people try to give to the Gnostics, is that it's too black and white. But in reality, it's all part of the will of the one. It's all part of a divine plan, and it's really Sophia working through them all, doing all this. And in regards to the process of individuation, it's the idea of being asleep and waking up. So it says that she is in those who are asleep. She awakens them, and she is the sight of those who are asleep. So whether you're asleep or awake, you still have Sophia in you. We're never disconnected from them. We're always intimately united with them. And here it says, I descended to the midst of the underworld, and I shone down on the darkness. I made the waters surge. I am hidden in radiant waters. I gradually made the all radiant by my thought. And this is similar to the Genesis story of the movement on the water and how creation came to be. And so what it comes down to is that it's a universal story that she, well, I mean, it can get kind of complex that she is the water, but at the same time the Father is the water. But the whole point is that these are primal substances that gave birth to the creation of everything, of the universe, and that she is that movement on the water, the active intelligence. This one, I'll read this one. It says, through me comes gnosis. I am perception and knowledge, uttering voice by means of thought. I am the real voice. I resonate in everyone, and they know it, since the seed is in them. I am the thought of the Father, and through me came a voice, the knowledge of everlasting things. I reveal myself among all those who recognize me, for I am joined with everyone through hidden thought. This one's a quote from Irenaeus, who's a church father, that explains the story of Sophia, what this desire almost did to her, and it's from her point of view. So when she could not attain her end, which is to know the One, inasmuch as she aimed at an impossibility and thus became involved in an extreme agony of mind, while both on account of the vast profundity as well as the unsearchable nature of the Father, and on account of the love she had for him, she was ever stretching herself forward. And in the story, she's stretching herself so much that she literally falls out of the Pleroma. And so, in short, Sophia reflects the soul's archetypal power to know itself, to know the One, which is to seek wholeness, and she exists in the unconscious of humanity. Her story is the drama of the psyche, the soul's journey of unity, separation, and wholeness. And that is what the descent and ascent is. So, unity refers to when we're up in heaven or the Pleroma. And I've learned more details outside of the Nag Hammadi or the Gnostic scriptures, even with past life regression, where when we're in the afterlife, before we incarnate, every soul does have a memory of itself, but we're all still on a certain stage of our soul's evolution to where you just don't know everything and you're automatically an advanced soul. But that we're connected to, we're more at home, to say it like that. And when we come down, it's a separation and a fragmentation, and that's where more of Sophia's story comes in, the agony of mind, the hardships, sorrow, loneliness, and then to eventual wholeness, which that process and journey is what Carl Jung referred to as the process of individuation. And even to bring up what Lance did in his presentation, he said something like that you must do the work to be an actual spiritual person, and that it's not hard, or it's not easy, and it involves a process. And and that's what the story represents, and the Gnostics taught um, that for some it could be easier, but for the most part it can be extremely difficult, and you can reach a very low point that even though you could know that we're a child of the one, you can still feel overwhelmed and have your low points and moments. And here I wanted to bring this one in because I found it really interesting, and I can provide more context too, because this is a different tradition called Shaivism from India. And Shakti, her name means power, and she's also the active power of the mind of Shiva. And here it says, when the yogi unites his consciousness with Shakti through intensive awareness with a desire to gain universal consciousness. And that's referring to how you have to connect with Shakti to want to gain universal awareness, which is what the whole tradition of India teaches about, which is also becoming one with the one. And she brings about investigation of the beginningless characteristic of Shiva because she brings about the knowledge of the highest self, and because she dispels all that is not that highest self. And just like there's different faculties of the mind, that it's not just Sophia doing everything, there's different aspects of her doing these things. Here, aspect of Shakti is Jyetsta, and that's the power that inspires the individual for self-realization. And so this is where, like, Carl Jung, he was also working on Western and Eastern traditions, putting it all together and trying to modernize this more poetic language to help the modern mind come to know itself. And with the fall of Sophia, they also have a term in Sanskrit called Saktipata, which means the descent of Shakti, which also is the beginning of an individual's journey to know himself or to become a yogini. And so that's why even the Gnostics, like, they were working on this tradition as well, which is connected to the story of Jesus going to India and learning the wisdom from India. In my opinion, in the ancient world, even around Jesus' time, everyone was intermingling and sharing this wisdom. And the Gnostics, what they did was kind of put it all together for everyone during that time, not just to share the truth, but also to combat what was going on in their time, which is even the formation of Christianity and the church, and even the Roman Empire. So that's where the historical side of it's really interesting as to why the Gnostics really came together, wrote these texts, and what they were teaching, and what this all means, which I kind of mentioned in the beginning, which is Sophia's correction. It's multi-layered in that you can use it, almost just for yourself, and do a personal work, inner work, and then there's another side where you do that work, but then apply it to the external world and these times or their times, and almost try to do something about it and get into the more, you could say, darker aspects of why these things are going on, who's behind it, what are the forces. And I like to say, and others, that Sophia reflects the soul, because in general, in ancient thought, the soul is feminine. And a well-known one is Persephone or Kore, or Psyche and Eros. Like, she's always female, and there's always a male God or force trying to ensnare, seduce, and trap that soul for himself, and even you could say for his minions. And that's what the story of Yaldabaoth, Sophia, and the Archons. And so these aren't new ideas. These are what the Gnostics did, is kind of reinterpret, reinvent what has been known since ancient times and taught, and they, kind of not made up their own version, but interpreted it in such a way that was for their times and what was going on during their times. And she's the innate power of thinking and reflecting. She's the mediator of our outer and inner world. And a detail of this is that there's a higher and lower Sophia, which is a simple criticism that you could say the church fathers gave. Like, if she's all wise, why did she make a mistake? Why did she feel pain? Why did she fall out when she's one with the one? And they separated in higher and lower Sophia, and that draws into a tradition as well called Kabbalah and the Tree of Life. It's how they, because a lot of these ideas have diagrams that you could use to visualize how the universe and these realms are structured, and naturally there's a higher and a lower part. But since she is all, not only is she in the highest, but she's also in the lowest. And that's similar to the teachings of the beginning and the end, Alpha and Omega. And the fall of Sophia is the myth of the fall of Sophia is the descent into the unconscious that begins the process of knowing oneself. And this is a quote from Carl Jung on the Gnostics. He said, "For they too had been confronted with the primal world of the unconscious and had dealt with its contents." And that's where I can briefly mention that why I find a lot of this important and relevant is that it's at these ideas of Gnosticism, Gnosis, Sophia, they're at the core of what has happened or what modern people have learned. And it's even connected to medicine and psychology, and even down to science fiction, movies, everything. A lot of people have studied this stuff and then have realized its importance and its universal, how universal these teachings are and how important they are, and how it's a truth that, like how I said, these people have figured out answers. And with the destruction of libraries and everything that has been going on, which the Gnostics refer to as like a war against the dark forces, all this stuff is what they have wanted to keep from us so that we don't learn and grow and heal and move forward. And that's the next slide is about the Sophia's correction. But let me just say here, Carl Jung, he says, hence individuation is a mysterium conjunctionis, the self being experienced as a nuptial union of opposite halves, which is Hieros Gamos and the syzygy. And so that's what is at the core of the Gnostic teachings, is the union. And that's why in the highest sense it's a non-dual tradition, because it's not that the father and the mother or Sophia and Logos are separated. They are whole, two parts of the same whole. That in the Shiva tradition it says that Shakti is the face of Shiva, and that only through her can he be known. And so now I want to get into the more detailed parts of this. Sophia's correction, and a quote from On the Origin of the World, it says, "When Pistis saw what came into being from her deficiency, she was disturbed." So Sophia's correction refers to the correction of error and falsehood, destruction of darkness and ignorance, exposing the false gods and archons of the universe, and what's unique to this story that the Gnostics wrote is that humanity has a active role in it, and it's a choice that everyone can make, and that's where it's multi-layered, because by healing yourself, doing the inner work, that is contributing to Sophia's correction, because the correction begins with each individual, and individuals can work together to deal with bigger problems, you could say. And the where you can get deeper into it is, like, for example, these texts, the Nag Hammadi, they refer to this war that humanity has been in, and it's a war on consciousness. And they kind of explained why these things have been happening on Earth, like just war, destruction, ignorance, and it even refers to a certain group of humans doing it, because the word archon doesn't just refer to a cosmic ruler of force. It also that was a name given to leaders, political leaders at the time, and this goes back even to Plato's time. They were called the archons, and to me that mirrors what's going on today with the political craziness and the people involved in that, the so-called cabal, the upper classes, the royalty. What it comes down to, what the Gnostics say, is that these people are serving these dark forces, and they work hand in hand to enslave humanity. And that's, if you've studied, if you know about ancient history, even the Bible, there's sacrifices, worship, temples, idols, all this stuff. Like, the Gnostics wanted to understand pretty much the big picture of all that. And in my opinion, they did. That people today have turned to the Gnostic text to even understand what's going on in our times. And that was even one of the main roles of why Jesus came, was to reveal a lot of these teachings and to fight against the corruption that was going on, the priesthoods, and to free souls. So with the process of individuation, when you come to know yourself, it's what they can refer to as the fourth one. And this is Jesus speaking. It's a quote. He says, "Blessed are you when you see yourself as the fourth one in heaven." And with using Carl Jung's terminology, he broke it down like this: that there's that the fourth aspect of ourself is our true self, and you have to integrate three other aspects, at least in this little explanation, because there's technically four. Animus is male, anima is female, old man is the wise archetype, but there's also like the shadow, but that's part of the unconscious. So what the whole point of this is that in ancient times and in modern times, what people have brought forth as important teachings is to unite every part of yourself to reach wholeness. And it's not a state of perfection. It's not to, almost you could say, like even become a god in a grandiose sense, but it's to unite opposing parts of yourself and to make them whole. And in this little quote, the blessed are you, that's kind of the way even Jesus teaches, is like very succinctly and simply to get you to understand the core teachings of what this is all about. And this is a pretty interesting quote of the descent of the soul into the underworld and how you can ascend. So it says, "Wherefore send me, O Father, seals in my hands I will descend. Through aeons universal I will make a path. Through mysteries all I'll open up a way. All forms of gods will I display. The secrets of the holy path I will hand on and call them gnosis." I do have a few quotes that refers to Sophia's correction, and it's similar to like the apocalypse tradition of the New Testament. And it's kind of a whole nother subject, but I find it interesting and important because other people are doing similar work and trying to almost create a timeline or understand when this is happening or how it will happen. Because even these cycles have happened before and everything repeats itself. But this one, it refers to how Sophia will kind of not destroy everything, but will be a fire that purifies everything. And in this second part, it is fragmented, but it says something like, "Mercy will come through Sophia. The sons of matter will perish, and they will not be. Souls will appear who are holy through the light of the power, who is exalted above all powers." And the Aeon of Sophia here is referred to as the Aeon of Beauty, which is also an Aeon of Judgment. And that judgment just refers to what the previous slide said, to exposing error and falsehood. And so what this is showing, and why I'm mentioning it, is that it's it'll eventually lead to something good. Like we have to go through hardship to get to the light, and there will be a type of inner and outer destruction that takes place. And it says that Sophia will lead it all, and she will be the power and force behind it. So this one says, I won't read it all, but it says, "They will be freed of blind thought. They will trample on death, which comes from the authorities. They will ascend into the limitless light where this offspring belongs. Then the authorities will relinquish their ages, their angels will weep over their destruction, and their demons will lament their death. Then all the children of the light will truly know the truth and the root and the Father of all and the Holy Spirit. They will all say with a single voice, the Father's truth is just, and the child presides over all." So that's an example of who will be affected by this correction when the truth is known and and I'll just leave it at that. This one is interesting because it's referring to the God of the Old Testament, where he says, I am the only God, there is no other God but me. In this text, Sophia says, you are mistaken, Samael, which means blind God. There is an immortal man of light who has been in existence before you and who will appear among your modeled forms. He will trample you to scorn, just as potter's clay is pounded, and you will descend to your mother, the abyss, along with those that belong to you. For at the consummation of your works, the entire defect that has become visible out of the truth will be abolished, and it will cease to be, and will be like what has never been. Saying this, Pistis revealed her likeness of her greatness in the waters, and doing so, she withdrew up to her light. So this is a verse that really captures the core of what Sophia's correction is. Because when you connect with your true self, the Gnostics and other traditions refer to it as an archetypal man or human. And it's what's known as the first human, the human of light, the first child of the one, the child of the one in Sophia. And it is this archetypal man which Jesus Christ is modeled after, that every individual, I don't want to say it should strive to become, but that's the purpose of the process of individuation and knowing yourself, is to connect with the immortal man within us, or the immortal human. And this one says, and a great clap of thunder will come out of the great force that is above all the forces of chaos, where the firmament of the woman is situated. Having created the first product, she will put away the wise fire of intelligence and clothe herself with witless wrath. Then she will pursue the gods of chaos, whom she created along with the prime parent. She will cast them down into the abyss. They will be obliterated because of their wickedness. And from the Corpus Hermeticum, so let us not be afraid to tell the truth. The true human is above even the gods, or at least fully their equal. After all, none of the celestial gods will leave the heavenly frontiers and descend to earth. Yet the human establishes himself on high without leaving the earth. So far does his power extend. We must presume then to say that the earthly human is a mortal god, and that the celestial god is an immortal human. And so this one and the other one about the immortal man, that's what's referring to as the true human. And this is even a different tradition, which is of the Hermetica. It's an example of what these traditions are teaching, in that there are forces or powers that are above everything that we have been taught is above us, or more powerful than us, more superior, or even who has created us. And that the truth is that we don't belong to them, we're not of them, and that our true origins is in the one, in the Pleroma, above everything. And then I found this quote interesting, and this is the last one, the last slide, where it's Carl Jung, and he refers to again, the process of individuation and kind of what the first thing that one has to do to begin it. And it's referring to confronting the mother. And so it goes, because the first encounter with her usually leads one to infer anything rather than wisdom. This aspect appears only to the person who gets to grips with her seriously. Only then, when this hard task has been faced, which is coming to terms with the contents of the collective unconscious, does he come to realize more and more that behind all her cruel sporting with human fate, there lies something like a hidden purpose, which seems to reflect a superior knowledge of life's laws.
Wow.
And that's all the slides that I have.
That's enough.
So does anyone have any questions or want to talk about anything?
So are we to understand, this is a lot to digest. Yes. So Sophia was the first creation. I thought one of your early slides said that she was the first creation that God, our creator, brought into material form or just spiritual?
Spiritual.
Okay, so did she help procreate the spirits if she was the female version of God's source? Is that what your belief is? Is that what the Gnostic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe repeat the question so that.
Yeah. Like, so is that, did she help procreate the spirits in the spirit realm? So the way that it's explained, so there is, they do use terms like, like physical union terms, like procreate, but it's more of a what they call emanation. So one way is like dreaming or thinking, and a spontaneous process rather than physical bodies or even forms. If that.
So she dreamt us, because they say thoughts create things, so it's just through that visioning and thinking that we were created.
Mm-hmm. And that's the archetype of humanity. The Gnostics refer to as the anthropos. It was created through as a dream, as a thought, and then there's the physical version of it, and that's connected to even the origins of humanity, um, which is the physical side. So this is where I just kind of I briefly touched on how they try to understand the human story from beginning to end, from the creation of humanity. So that right there is a big topic. Who created us? Where did we come from? And something that people have put together is the idea of panspermia, that the human genome was seeded on the earth from outside. And so where, if it came from outside, where did it come from and who put it there? And so I'm not saying I have the answer, but it's like a type of spontaneous creation, the human genome that exists as a template in the universe that can be seeded on different worlds. And but the Gnostic said that who created that was Sophia, the Logos, the One, and the Aeons.
So does it talk in the Gnostic text about how were the archons created? And have you ever made a connection between the matrix and how the archons and the demons and the other beings that have been manipulating us and changing us and as God finest creation, us.
In the Matrix, you just mean like
the overlay that they've done on the planet. And
yeah. So there are different versions that they give on the origins of the archons and these dark forces, and from what I've understood, because I've also looked into aliens and extraterrestrials, and the popular theory is that they created humanity through manipulation of our genetics. But first, with the archons, the story is that when she fell out of the Pleroma, she created the archons instantaneously, and it has to do. There's literally like a type of science behind it of plasma and material substance. Off the top of my head, I'd have to find the actual reference for this, but they've done a study where they like had sand or just maybe dirt, and they zapped it with electricity, and bugs appeared. Bugs. And so the question is like, where do those bugs come from? How did that happen? So the story is that when she fell out of the Pleroma and her light hit the material realms, it created the archons. And they even say that the archons were created first and then Yaldabaoth, which is their father, so that he could rule over them. Because when the detail of the story is that when she came out and those archons were created, they were surrounding her and she was overwhelmed. And so she petitioned for help and said, almost like, can I create this Yaldabaoth character so that he can rule over them and I can be left alone? And then that's a whole nother process, and a whole nother story as well.
So did the Gnostics, because I kind of come to my understanding that Lucifer was the one that created the archon.
Okay.
So do you know anything in your studies about that?
No, honestly, with specifically Lucifer, I haven't seen it mentioned in the Nag Hammadi, because I mainly just stick to the Gnostic texts and their versions.
Interesting. And who was her partner? Because I thought it was she had a partner, and then like did she was never in she never created in material form?
Again, there's two versions. Her partner, one of them is Christ, the Logos, and then in another version, her partner is in another Aeon named Thelete, which means will.
So a partner they're referring to an essence, not a personages.
Yep. Say more of an essence.
I would just like to add to the essence versus the personage that when we're speaking of wisdom, we are speaking of we're calling wisdom feminine, and there's not a personage. It's just an image that we get in our minds as humans when we say wisdom is feminine. And so that can really trip us up when we begin to talk about who or what her partner is, right? So, yeah, that's all.
Yeah, that's why, to me, these texts and these stories are like a framework that we use to try to comprehend these things. And that's why she's referred to as incomprehensible. All these things are essentially incomprehensible, unknowable. But with the Gnostics and ancient peoples, they didn't just leave it at that. They wanted to know and try to comprehend. So they created, ideas, framework, stories to try to grasp it all. And that's what I find unique with the Nag Hammadi and even ancient texts in general, is that it's their attempt to try to comprehend the metaphysical worlds and ideas.
Sounds like Carl Jung was trying to do that as well.
And no, that's exactly it. He wanted to kind of bridge science and spirituality together, even just from the point of view that it's all coming from within ourselves, and that's the dynamic of the ancient teachings and these stories, is that as above, so below, and in a way, what's happening in heaven on the outside is also happening within, and he did a good job bridging that. Any more questions?
Awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah, really.
Fantastic work. There's